The billionaire walked into his favorite restaurant with his mistress on his arm and froze when he saw his pregnant ex-wife sitting in his private booth. Not just pregnant, very pregnant, and smiling at the one man he could not afford to offend. Caleb Blackwood stopped so abruptly that the Mayday nearly bumped into him. The dining room of Valerian was made for men like Caleb. Dark walnut floors, low gold light, crystal glasses that cost more than a family vacation. No loud music, no visible prices, no guests who needed to ask where the restroom was. This was where senators, founders, old money heirs, and dangerous men with soft voices came to make decisions over wine. Caleb had come to celebrate. Tonight, he had closed the North Star Grid deal, a $12 billion clean energy infrastructure contract that would make Blackwood Capital untouchable. He wore a midnight tuxedo, his dark hair brushed back, his watch glittering beneath his cuff like a private declaration that time belonged to him. Beside him, Sienna Vale held his arm. She was 27, blonde, sharp-boned, and dressed in a silver gown that seemed designed more for cameras than dinner. Her perfume arrived before she did. Her laugh was bright enough to cut glass. She had spent the last year teaching Caleb how useful beauty could be when attached to ambition. He liked bringing her into rooms. She made him look newly victorious. Then he saw his ex-wife. Lydia Hartwell sat in the booth Caleb always requested, the velvet alcove near the back, where the powerful could be seen without seeming to ask for attention. She wore a deep blue dress with long sleeves and no jewelry, except a narrow gold band on her right hand. Her auburn hair was gathered low at her neck. Her face looked softer than Caleb remembered, fuller, healthier, almost luminous. Her hand rested on the curve of her belly. Caleb stared. 6 months earlier, he had signed the divorce papers and watched Lydia walk out of the courthouse in a gray coat, thinner than she had been in years. He remembered feeling relieved. He had thought the divorce was the cleanest transaction of his life. She received the lake house, a generous settlement, and the dignity of disappearing. Now she sat in his booth, carrying a child. Across from her sat Rowan Ellery. Caleb's jaw tightened. Rowan was not a rebound. Rowan Ellery was old capital, old restraint, old power. His family owned ports, private research labs, energy patents, and entire neighborhoods without putting their name on buildings. He was tall, silver-eyed, dark-haired, and calm in a way Caleb despised. Caleb shouted with money. Rowan whispered with ownership. Rowan leaned toward Lydia and said something. Lydia laughed. Not politely, not sadly, not the careful little laugh she used near Caleb in their final years. A real laugh. That was when Caleb felt the first wave of rage. The pregnancy struck him like a public insult. The laughter made it personal. Sienna followed his gaze. Her mouth curved. "Is that her?" she whispered. "Oh." She moved quickly. Caleb did not answer. Sienna's eyes dropped to Lydia's stomach. Her smile sharpened. How desperate. Some women lose a billionaire and try to replace him before the ink dries. Caleb heard the insult, but his mind had already begun counting months. Divorce finalized in June. It was December now. Lydia looked 7 months pregnant. Impossible. Unless... The thought opened in him like a blade. For 4 years, he and Lydia had tried for a child. Doctors, calendars, injections, silent car rides after failed appointments. Caleb hated those years. He hated the disappointment in Lydia's eyes. He hated how her hope made his failure visible. He hated the sterile clinic rooms where his body became data. Then he met Sienna. Sienna never asked him to sit in waiting rooms. Sienna never cried over test results. Sienna told him he was too powerful to spend his life apologizing for biology. So Caleb left. And now Lydia was pregnant, with Rowan Ellery beside her. The maître d' cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Blackwood, your table is ready." Caleb ignored him and crossed the dining room. Conversation thinned as people noticed. Sienna followed, one hand gathering the hem of her gown. Excitement bright in her eyes. She loved public scenes as long as someone else bled. Rowan noticed them first. His hand moved, not dramatically, but enough to rest against the back of Lydia's booth. A protective gesture. Quiet. Certain. Lydia turned. For 1 second, Caleb saw surprise. Then it vanished. "Caleb," she said. Her voice was calm. That enraged him more than tears would have. "Lydia." His eyes dropped to her belly again. Sienna stepped beside him, smiling like a woman entering a room she had already decided to own. "Lydia, what a surprise. We were just celebrating Caleb's North Star victory. You remember, the project he was building while you two were still dealing with all those personal difficulties." Lydia looked at Sienna. Not angrily, not even coldly. She looked at her the way a woman looks at a cheap glass pretending to be crystal. Then she turned back to Caleb. "Congratulations." The word was polite. The dismissal was not. Caleb's face tightened. "You did not waste much time." The nearby tables went silent. Rowan's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to harden. Lydia slowly placed one hand over her belly. "No," she said. "I stopped wasting it." Sienna gave a soft laugh. That is one way to describe it. Rowan looked at her then. Only once. Sienna's smile faltered. Caleb leaned closer. "Whose child is it?" Lydia's eyes sharpened. "This is not the place. This is exactly the place." His voice rose. "You show up in my restaurant, in my booth, visibly pregnant beside my biggest rival, and expect me not to ask?" Rowan stood. He did not rush. He did not puff his chest. He simply rose, and the room understood the difference between noise and authority. "Mr. Blackwood," Rowan said, his voice low, "you are embarrassing yourself." Caleb laughed once. "You think you can lecture me? I think you should lower your voice around a pregnant woman." Caleb's hands curled into fists. Lydia slid carefully out of the booth. Rowan immediately offered his arm, and she took it without hesitation. That burned worse than anything. Caleb looked at her belly again. "Is it mine?" Lydia met his gaze. "You signed away the right to ask that question." The sentence landed like a slap. Sienna blinked. Caleb went still. "What does that mean?" "It means," Lydia said quietly, "that the last time you signed paperwork without reading it, you made several choices you are only beginning to understand." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Lydia turned to Rowan. "I'm tired. Can we go home?" "Home." The word entered Caleb's chest and stayed there. Rowan placed a hand at the small of Lydia's back. "Of course." They walked past him. No drama, no explanation, no backward glance. The entire restaurant watched Caleb Blackwood stand motionless in the aisle beside the mistress he had chosen, while the wife he discarded left with another man, carrying a future he had not known existed. Sienna touched his sleeve. "Caleb, people are staring." He looked at her then. For one brief moment, he saw the silver dress, the painted mouth, the hunger behind her eyes. He had traded his wife for applause, and across the room, the applause had stopped. Chapter 2. Lydia did not shake until she reached the car. Rowan helped her into the back seat of the dark sedan and closed the door before walking around to the other side. The driver pulled away from Valerian without needing instruction. Inside the car, the city moved past in streaks of white and gold. Lydia sat upright, one hand under her belly, the other pressed against the leather seat. Her breath was shallow. Rowan watched her face. "Are you in pain?" "No, Lydia." She closed her eyes. "Not that kind." He said nothing. That was one of the reasons she trusted him. Rowan did not rush to fill silence with advice. He let it show its own shape. After a moment, he reached into the console, took out a bottle of water, opened it, and placed it in her hand. She drank. Her fingers were steady now. "I knew we might see him eventually," she said. "I did not think it would be there. You handled him well. I wanted to throw water in his face. That would also have been acceptable." A small laugh escaped her. Then it faded. He looked at the baby like property. Rowan's jaw tightened. He always did confuse ownership with love. Lydia turned toward the window. 6 months earlier, She had believed leaving Caleb would feel like dying. Not because she still trusted him. Not because she did not know about Sienna. She knew. Women often know before the evidence arrives. They know from the new cologne, the late calls, the changed passwords, the way a husband stops touching them, but still expects access to their loyalty. What had hurt was not only the affair. It was how easily Caleb rewrote the marriage. When Lydia cried after their third failed embryo transfer, Caleb told her grief made her difficult to be around. When she asked him to come to the fertility clinic for the next appointment, he said the North Star bid was more important than repeating bad news in a white room. When she found Sienna's earring under the passenger seat of his car, he said she was becoming paranoid. 2 weeks later, his lawyers sent the divorce proposal. Clean, efficient, brutal. He gave Lydia the lake house and a settlement large enough to make gossip pages call him generous. He did not know the lake house had belonged to Lydia's family trust since before the marriage. He did not know she had taken less because she wanted him to believe he had won. And he did not know she had already spoken with the fertility clinic. The embryo had been created during the marriage. Both parties had signed consent forms after their last treatment cycle, including a clause Caleb never read. If the marriage ended, either partner could withdraw from future joint attempts. But Lydia retained independent use of the embryo assigned to her under the clinic's custodial agreement. Caleb had signed because he was late for a dinner with Sienna. He had not asked a single question. 3 weeks after the divorce, Lydia returned to Genesis Reproductive Center alone. Rowan had driven her. Not as a lover. Not then. As a friend. As the trustee director of Hartwell Green Foundation, her family's energy and medical research fund, he had known Lydia since she was 22. He had watched Caleb charm rooms, watched Lydia disappear beside him, watched Sienna enter the story like a perfume stain no one wanted to name. When Lydia called him after the divorce and said she wanted to use the embryo, Rowan asked only one question. "Are you doing this to keep a piece of him?" Lydia answered honestly. "No. I am doing it because I want the child I fought for, even if the marriage was a mistake." He nodded. Then he helped her hire the right doctors, the right lawyers, and the right security. The transfer worked. For the first time in 4 years, Lydia saw 2 lines. She cried in the clinic bathroom alone at first. Then Rowan knocked once and asked, "May I come in?" She opened the door. He stood there with a paper cup of ginger tea and the frightened tenderness of a man who knew better than to call it joy too soon. That was the moment something shifted. Not romance. Not yet. Safety. Now, months later, sitting beside him after Caleb's public confrontation, Lydia touched her belly. The baby kicked once, strong and annoyed. Rowan's face softened. He objects to his father's volume. Lydia smiled despite herself. He objects to bad manners. He has excellent instincts. The car turned toward the Ellery residence, a quiet limestone building near the park. Rowan had offered his guest suite when Lydia's pregnancy became complicated and paparazzi began appearing near the lake house. She had hesitated. He had said, "Then do not call it moving in. Call it being protected by someone who reads documents." That had made her laugh. Tonight the joke felt heavier. "Caleb will investigate," she said. "Yes. He will find the IVF records. Yes. He will try to claim the baby." Rowan looked at her. "No. He will try to claim what the baby represents." Lydia absorbed that. Legacy. Bloodline. Proof. Victory. Caleb did not want a child. He wanted an heir because another man was willing to raise one. "He will also find the North Star trap," Rowan said. Lydia's gaze sharpened. It was not a trap. No, he chose the bid. He chose the debt. He chose the old technology. He chose to ignore every warning because he wanted to announce himself king of the grid. Rowan smiled faintly. "You are getting better at saying what things are." Lydia looked out the window as the city darkened around them. For years she had been careful with language. Caleb was not cruel. He was under pressure. The affair was not betrayal. It was confusion. Her silence was not fear, it was dignity. No more. Then let us say it clearly, she said. Caleb bought a throne with borrowed money. We simply know where the legs are cracked. Chapter 3. Sienna Vale had never liked being second. She had built her life around being noticed first. First face in the photograph. First name whispered at a table. First woman a man looked for when he entered a room. At Valerian, Lydia Hartwell had taken that from her without even trying. Sienna sat in the back of Caleb's car, arms folded, silver gown catching the passing streetlights. Caleb stared out the window, jaw clenched, saying nothing. That irritated her. She could handle anger. She could handle desire. She could even handle cruelty if it came with diamonds and access. Silence made her feel poor. Are you going to speak? She asked. He did not turn. Not now. She laughed softly. You almost attacked your pregnant ex-wife in the middle of Valerian. I think now is a little late for restraint. His head snapped toward her. Careful. The old Sienna might have softened. She knew when to press and when to purr. But Lydia's face, calm and dismissive, burned in her mind. You told me she was pathetic, Sienna said. You told me she was broken after the divorce. She was. She did not look broken. Caleb's eyes flashed. Do you enjoy this? I enjoy knowing what room I am standing in. You are standing in mine. No, Sienna said, voice colder now. Tonight I stood in hers. That landed. Caleb looked away again. Sienna's fingers tightened on her clutch. She had pushed for the divorce. Not openly at first. She was smarter than that. She had asked questions. Why does Lydia never attend your late dinners? Why does she dress like a trustee's widow? Why should a man building the future be tied to a woman obsessed with failed pregnancies? The last question had made Caleb flinch, but not enough to leave. So Sienna became practical. She helped him charm senators. She fed him lines before interviews. She turned his impatience into branding. She made him feel like leaving Lydia was not abandonment, but evolution. And tonight, after all of that, Lydia sat glowing beside Rowan Ellery, carrying a baby Sienna feared might belong to Caleb. If that child was Caleb's, Sienna's place changed instantly. Mistress was survivable. Mistress beside a disputed heir was not. Is it yours? She asked. Caleb's face hardened. I do not know. What do you mean you do not know? I mean I do not know. She stared at him. Then find out. He looked at her slowly. Do you think I need your instruction? I think you need something, because for the first time since I met you, you look like a man who lost. The car went very quiet. Caleb's hand closed around the edge of the seat. Sienna realized she had gone too far. Then his phone rang. He answered without looking at the screen. Flint. Sienna watched his face change. Not anger, focus. The fixer. Of course. Everything, Caleb said. Lydia Hartwell. Rowan Ellery. Genesis Reproductive Center. The pregnancy timeline. I want every legal document connected to the embryo storage and transfer. And get me Ellery's energy patents, North Star too. A pause. I said everything. He ended the call. Sienna studied him. What are you going to do? Caleb's voice was flat. Take back what is mine. Sienna felt something twist in her stomach. She had thought the enemy was Lydia. Now she understood the enemy might be the child. Because if Caleb decided the baby was his, Sienna would become a decorative mistake. She looked out the window, mind racing. Sienna had not survived expensive men by trusting them. She had recordings, copies of emails, photos of ledgers Caleb thought she did not understand. He kept private financial notes behind a painting in the penthouse. He thought Sienna never noticed, because she smiled when he talked. Men often mistake smiling for stupidity. That was useful. That night, after Caleb dropped her at her apartment with barely a goodbye, Sienna sat on the edge of her bed and replayed the small audio clip she had captured in the car. Take back what is mine. His voice sounded hard, possessive, dangerous. Sienna saved it to a hidden folder. Then she opened another file, Blackwood Private Ledgers. She had taken photos weeks ago, only because habit told her to prepare for winter even in summer. Now winter had arrived. Chapter 4. Caleb received the first report 48 hours later. He stood barefoot in his penthouse living room, surrounded by glass walls and an immaculate view of Manhattan. The apartment had been praised in design magazines as severe, masculine, and architectural. Lydia had once called it a beautiful place to be lonely. He had told her she was being dramatic. Now the sentence returned like an unwelcome guest. The report arrived by courier in a plain envelope. Flint never used email for the expensive truth. Caleb tore it open. Subject: Lydia Hartwell. Divorce finalized June 9th. Embryo transfer at Genesis Reproductive Center July 1st. Estimated due date late March. Embryo created during marriage, March prior year. Genetic contributors: Lydia Hartwell and Caleb Blackwood. Legal custody clause: independent maternal use authorized by joint consent, signed April prior year. Caleb read the last line again. Joint consent. Signed. He did not remember. Then he did. A clinic room. Lydia pale from hormones. A nurse handing them documents. Caleb checking his phone because Sienna had sent a photo from a hotel pool. Lydia asking if he had read the forms. He had signed them without looking. His hand tightened around the report until the paper wrinkled. It was his biological child. A son or daughter, he did not know yet. But his blood, his heir, his child, growing under the protection of Rowan Ellery. Relief hit first, then rage, then panic. He had told himself Lydia jumped to another man because she was desperate. He had mocked her in his head for being replaceable. But she had carried his child all along, and she had not told him. No, he thought, she had no right. Then another part of him answered. You gave her every reason not to. He crushed that thought quickly. The second envelope contained the North Star analysis. Caleb opened it with less urgency. That changed after the first page. Rowan Ellery's company, Ellery Systems, had developed a solid-state hydrogen storage cell that could outperform Blackwood Capital's North Star infrastructure by nearly every metric. Higher density, lower heat risk, faster grid response. Patent filings hidden under European subsidiaries. Trial data months ahead of public disclosure. Caleb's winning North Star bid used older lithium infrastructure. It was safe, profitable, and expensive. But if Ellery announced the new storage cell after Blackwood had overextended on North Star, Caleb's project would become a debt-heavy bridge to someone else's future. His mouth went dry. He flipped pages. The timeline was worse. Ellery Systems had withdrawn from the final North Star bidding round 2 days before Caleb overbid. At the time, Caleb celebrated. He called it dominance. Now it looked like bait. He paced the room. Lydia knew energy, not because she had worked in his office. She had not. He kept her away from the firm's sharp rooms, as he called them. But her family foundation, Hartwell Green, funded clean energy pilot programs, climate infrastructure grants, and university labs. He had dismissed it as charity. He had dismissed so many expensive things as charity, because he did not understand power unless it came with a press release. Lydia and Rowan had not stolen his project. They had let him buy the wrong one. His phone rang. Flint. Caleb answered immediately. Talk. You have a bigger problem than the child. I read the memo, then read the appendix. Caleb pulled the last sheets free. Pension fund collateral, offshore stabilization accounts, deferred debt instruments. His chest tightened. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Answer me. Someone close enough to photograph your private ledgers. Sienna. The name arrived before Flint said it. Caleb slowly lowered the papers. Who has it? I do not know, but if I found traces, others can. Caleb ended the call. The room seemed colder. For months, he had moved money aggressively to secure North Star. Pension-linked collateral. Offshore liquidity reserves. Accounting choices that were not illegal if no one looked too closely, but catastrophic if anyone did. Sienna knew. Lydia might know. Rowan almost certainly knew. Caleb crossed the room to the painting above the private bar. He opened the hidden safe. Empty. For a moment, he did not understand what he was seeing. Then he did. The private ledgers were gone. His first thought was not of prison, not of regulators, not of investors. It was of Lydia in the booth, one hand on her belly, saying he had signed away the right to ask. He had thought she meant the child. Now he wondered if she meant everything. Chapter 5. Lydia read Caleb's legal threat over breakfast. She was at Rowan's residence, wearing a cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. A bowl of oatmeal sat untouched beside a glass of ginger tea. The baby had been restless all morning, pressing low enough that Lydia had slept only 2 hours. Across the table, Rowan reviewed the document with the calm expression of a man reading a weather report. Caleb Blackwood intended to file for paternity recognition, emergency injunction against removal of the child from New York, and review of embryo usage. He also alleged Lydia had used genetic material without informed consent. Lydia reached for the tea. Her hand shook once. Rowan noticed. She hated that he noticed and loved it at the same time. "Say it," she said. "He is trying to frighten you. I know. The consent forms are strong. I know. He will make it ugly. I know that too." Rowan set the papers down. "Lydia," she looked up. "You do not have to be composed with me." The sentence nearly broke her. For years, composition had been her armor. Caleb hated public mess. The more he betrayed her, the quieter she became. She had learned to swallow feelings before they reached her face. Now the habit remained, even when safety sat across from her. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. "I am not afraid he will win," she said. "I am afraid he will make this child's beginning about ownership." Rowan's face softened. "He will try." She placed a hand over her stomach. This baby was wanted in a clinic room where Caleb was checking his phone. Wanted in every injection, every failed transfer, every night I thought my body had betrayed me. Caleb does not get to arrive now and call that legacy. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Then we answer before he files." Lydia's gaze sharpened. "How?" Not with emotion, with chronology. He slid a folder toward her. Inside were copies of the clinic consent forms, signed by Caleb. Divorce settlement language in which Caleb waived involvement in any remaining reproductive materials except as set forth in prior clinic agreements. Emails from Lydia's attorney confirming independent embryo use. Medical records showing the transfer after the divorce. Clean. Legal. Boring. Exactly the kind of evidence that ruins dramatic lies. Lydia looked at the last document. "What is this?" "Birth plan authorization." She read it. Only Lydia Hartwell and Rowan Ellery were approved for delivery, emergency updates, and neonatal access. Caleb Blackwood was specifically excluded pending legal review. Her throat tightened. "Rowan, I will not assume rights you do not give me," he said. "But if you want me there, the hospital needs the document now." She looked at him. This was the difference. Caleb treated her choices as obstacles. Rowan treated them as doors he needed permission to enter. "Yes," Lydia said softly. "I want you there." He nodded once. Something gentle moved between them, but neither rushed to name it. Lydia signed. Later that afternoon, she called Maren Voss, General Counsel for Hartwell Green Foundation. Maren had been waiting. "Caleb will likely move on paternity and public narrative," Maren said. "We are prepared." "What about North Star?" "Blackwood Capital is over-leveraged. If the pension collateral issue becomes public, regulators will freeze his accounts within hours." "And Sienna?" Maren paused. "She requested a meeting." Lydia looked out the window. Snow had begun falling over the park. "Sienna requested a meeting with us?" "With Rowan, technically. She says she has ledgers, recordings, and proof of offshore transfers. She wants immunity from civil action." Lydia almost laughed. "She called me desperate at Valerian. She also stole your seat at 2 charity dinners and leaked the divorce story to Page 6. "Yes. Do you want to refuse?" Lydia thought of Sienna's silver dress, Caleb's hand on her back, the smirk when she looked at Lydia's belly. Then she thought of the baby. Revenge could wait. Protection could not. "No," Lydia said. Give her the meeting. Chapter 6. Sienna arrived at Hartwell Green's office in a black coat and no perfume. That alone told Lydia something. The office occupied 3 floors of an old limestone building near Bryant Park. No logo on the door, no flashy lobby, just a brass plaque, green marble, and security people who looked polite enough to forget and trained enough not to. Sienna had never been here before. She had expected something softer. Charity women, donor walls, maybe photographs of children and wind farms. Instead, the conference room overlooked the city with the cold restraint of old money that did not need to decorate its power. Lydia was not in the room when Sienna entered. Rowan sat at the head of the table. Beside him were Maren Voss and a forensic accountant named Peter Hale. Sienna's eyes flicked to the empty chair. "Where is Lydia?" "Resting," Rowan said. That one word contained more warning than anger. Sienna removed her gloves slowly. "I want protection." Maren opened a folder. "From whom?" Sienna's laugh was bitter. "Everyone." "Be specific." "Caleb. Regulators. Blackwood Capital. Your foundation. The press. You ask a lot. I brought a lot." She placed a small black drive on the table. No one touched it. Peter took out an evidence bag. Sienna's face tightened. "Do you think I am lying?" Maren looked at her calmly. "I think you are motivated." Sienna sat. For the first time, her polished mask slipped. There were faint shadows under her eyes. Her nails were perfect, but the skin around one thumb had been picked raw. "Caleb called me a transaction," she said. Rowan did not react. Sienna's mouth twisted. "I know what I was. I am not asking you to make me innocent. I am asking you to understand that if Caleb goes down, I am not standing under him." Maren nodded to Peter. He took the drive. "What is on it?" Rowan asked. "Private ledgers. Photos from his safe. Recordings from the penthouse. Calls about moving pension-linked collateral offshore. Messages ordering me to leak stories about Lydia being unstable and using the pregnancy to trap him." Rowan's expression changed, very slightly. Sienna noticed. "He planned to call her unstable," she said. "He said pregnant women look sympathetic until you call them obsessive." Silence. Maren's pen stopped. Sienna looked down. "I did not leak that one." "How noble," Maren said. Sienna flinched. Then she looked up, and for one moment there was no glamour left, only spite and fear. "I was cruel to her. I know, I wanted to win. But Caleb did not just cheat on her. He wanted to erase her, then own the child when he realized it mattered. If I have to choose between being the last woman he ruins and the first woman to testify, I choose testimony." Rowan leaned back. "Why come to us instead of regulators?" "Because regulators move slowly. You do not." That was the first intelligent thing she had said. Maren looked at Rowan. He nodded. "Conditional cooperation," Maren said. "No promise until materials are verified. No immunity for theft, fraud, or defamation. If your evidence is useful, we can distinguish between witness and co-conspirator." Sienna's jaw tightened. "That is not generous." "It is honest." She looked toward the window. For a moment, she seemed younger than her face. Younger than the gowns and champagne and calculated smiles. "He told me Lydia was finished," she said quietly. "He said she had no power left." Rowan's voice was cold. "Caleb often mistakes silence for absence." Sienna turned back. "Is she really having his child?" Rowan did not answer. Maren did. "That is none of your business." Sienna nodded. "I suppose not." She stood to leave, then paused. "Tell her I am sorry." Maren's expression did not soften. No, Sienna blinked. "If you want to apologize, do it when it costs you something." Sienna left. Behind her, the drive remained on the table like a loaded weapon. Chapter 7. Caleb filed in family court 2 days later. He demanded recognition of paternity, emergency review of embryo use, temporary restrictions on Lydia's movement, and prenatal involvement rights. His petition described Lydia as emotionally unstable, manipulated by Rowan Ellery, and engaged in an attempt to deprive a biological father of his rightful child. The word rightful appeared 4 times. Marin read the petition aloud in Lydia's sitting room, because Lydia refused to let legal language become something whispered over her head. Lydia listened, one hand on her belly, face calm. When Marin finished, Rowan looked ready to break something quietly and efficiently. Lydia spoke first. File the response. It is ready, Marin said. Include Sienna's materials? Only the parts relevant to his credibility and public narrative. Good. Rowan turned to her. You are sure? No, Lydia said. But certainty is a luxury. Evidence is better. The hearing was set for the following week. Caleb arrived with 3 attorneys and a face made for cameras. He wore navy, not black. Softer. Concerned father, not angry billionaire. Reporters waited outside the courthouse, drawn by whispers of a paternity fight between a clean energy titan, his pregnant ex-wife, and a rival CEO. Lydia arrived through the front entrance. That was deliberate. She wore a charcoal maternity coat and low heels. Rowan walked beside her but did not touch her until she reached the stairs. Then he offered his arm. She took it. Cameras flashed. A reporter called, Mrs. Hartwell, is Mr. Blackwood the father? Lydia did not answer. Another shouted, Are you trying to keep him away from his child? She paused. Rowan looked at her. Lydia faced the cameras. No child should begin life as a headline written by an angry man. Then she walked inside. The clip went viral within the hour. In court, Caleb's attorney argued first. He spoke of biological rights, genetic legacy, emotional distress caused by concealment. He painted Caleb as a man shocked to discover his ex-wife had used his genetic material without meaningful consent. Lydia sat silently. Caleb watched her, waiting for shame. Elena had shamed easily in the past. She used to look down when he criticized her in front of guests. Lydia Hartwell, however, did not look down. The attorney concluded. Marin stood. Your Honor, Mr. Blackwood's petition depends on the claim that he was deceived. The documents show otherwise. The first exhibit appeared. Genesis Reproductive Center Consent Form, Caleb's signature. Clause 14. Upon dissolution of marriage, designated embryo may be used by Lydia Hartwell independently, provided no future parental obligations are imposed without subsequent legal action. The judge read carefully. Caleb's face tightened. Marin continued. Mr. Blackwood signed this in April. The divorce settlement references and preserves all existing clinic agreements. He also accepted a clause stating that any future paternity claim would require judicial review and consideration of conduct toward the mother during pregnancy. The second exhibit appeared. Divorce settlement, Caleb's signature. The judge looked over his glasses. Mr. Blackwood, did you read this agreement? Caleb's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client relied on counsel. The judge looked at Caleb. Did you read it? Caleb's jaw worked. No, the courtroom went still. Marin's voice remained even. Mr. Blackwood's failure to read documents does not become my client's fraud. Rowan lowered his eyes. Lydia did not smile. Not yet. Marin moved to the third exhibit. Private message from Caleb to Sienna. If Lydia makes a scene, we call her unstable. Pregnant, obsessive, using my legacy to stay relevant. The judge's expression changed. Caleb turned toward his lawyer. His lawyer looked like a man learning unpleasant facts in public. Marin did not stop. Fourth exhibit. Audio clip. Caleb's voice filled the courtroom. I promised you a good time. You were a transaction. The deal is closed. Sienna's voice followed. I've seen the real ledgers. The pension fund collateral, the offshore accounts, the rainy day fund you just liquidated to attack Damien. The recording ended. The room was silent. Caleb stared at the table. The judge looked at Marin. Counsel, explain relevance. Marin nodded. Mr. Blackwood is asking this court to grant prenatal involvement and possible future custodial standing while actively planning public defamation of the mother, while moving assets through undisclosed accounts, and while under potential regulatory exposure that may affect his stability and credibility. Caleb stood. This is a smear. The judge's voice sharpened. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood. He sat. For the first time, he looked less like a king than a man discovering the castle was mortgaged. Chapter 8. The court denied Caleb's emergency petition. Not permanently. Family court was careful. The judge recognized biological complexity, but refused to grant immediate access, restrictions, or prenatal authority based on a petition that omitted consent forms and misrepresented the facts. Lydia left with her birth plan intact. Caleb left with reporters shouting questions about embryos, ledgers, and Sienna Vale. By sunset, the business press had the story. By morning, the SEC announced a preliminary inquiry into Blackwood Capital's pension-linked collateral. By noon, North Star Grid's oversight board requested an emergency review of Blackwood's financing disclosures. Caleb called Sienna 17 times. She did not answer. He called Flint. The number was disconnected. He called his attorneys. They answered, but only to tell him to stop speaking to anyone without them present. In the penthouse, Caleb stood before the empty safe. The city stretched beneath him, indifferent. He had believed pressure made him sharper. But this was not pressure. This was collapse with good lighting. His phone buzzed. A tabloid alert. Pregnant ex-wife of billionaire wins first court round. Another. Mistress turns witness in Blackwood financial probe. Another. North Star Grid may pause contracts amid SEC inquiry. He threw the phone across the room. It struck the glass wall and fell to the floor, screen cracked. For a moment, Caleb simply breathed. Then he thought of the baby. The one thing not yet frozen, paused, investigated, or taken. His child. His heir. He would not lose that. He drove himself to the building where Lydia lived with Rowan. Security stopped him in the lobby. "Mr. Blackwood, you are not on the visitor list. I am here to see Lydia Hartwell. She is not receiving visitors. Tell her I am the father of her child." The security guard's expression did not change. "We have been instructed not to contact her for unscheduled visits." Caleb leaned forward. "Do you know who I am?" The guard looked at him with professional boredom. "Yes, sir." "That is why there are 4 of us." Caleb looked around. 4 security officers. All calm. All ready. Humiliation flushed through him. He stepped back before someone recorded it. As he turned to leave, the elevator doors opened. Rowan stepped out. He wore a gray overcoat, no tie, and the contained expression Caleb hated because it gave away nothing. "Julian," Rowan said. The wrong name almost came from the old version of the story, but this was Caleb. Rowan knew exactly who he was. His tone made Caleb feel like an administrative matter. "Let me see her." "No. You do not get to decide that. Lydia does. It's my child." Rowan moved closer. "The court disagreed with your timing." Caleb's eyes burned. "You think you can raise my baby?" Rowan's face remained calm. "I think fatherhood is not a blood test performed in anger. You are nothing to that child." Rowan did not blink. "I am the man who held Lydia through the first trimester while she vomited every morning. The man who drove her to appointments you never asked about. The man whose name is on the emergency contact form because she trusts me not to turn her fear into leverage." Caleb flinched despite himself. Rowan's voice lowered. "You do not want to be a father. You want to keep score." Caleb stepped closer. "Do not test me." Rowan's eyes cooled. "You are being tested by regulators, lenders, a family court judge, and the woman you underestimated for years. I am the least of your problems." Caleb wanted to strike him. The desire moved through his body, hot and useless. But cameras watched. Security waited. Lawyers existed. He had already lost enough rooms. He turned and left. Outside, snow had begun to fall. For the first time in years, Caleb Blackwood walked down a public sidewalk alone. No driver, no mistress, no wife, no audience. Chapter 9. Lydia went into labor 3 weeks early. It happened at dawn. She woke with a sharp pain low in her back and a pressure that made the room tilt. For a moment, she thought it was a dream. Then another contraction came, stronger, and she gripped the edge of the bed. Rowan. He was awake instantly. That became one of the small facts she would remember later. He did not rise slowly. He did not ask whether she was sure. He was beside her before fear could finish forming. The hospital bag was ready. The birth plan was filed. Marin and the doctor had already coordinated security. Still, birth does not care how carefully humans prepare. In the car, Lydia closed her eyes and breathed through the pain. Rowan sat beside her, one hand open on the seat between them. He did not grab her. He waited. She took his hand. "I am scared," she said. "I know. What if Caleb comes?" "He will not get past the desk." "What if something goes wrong?" Rowan's face tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Then I will still be here." She looked at him through tears. That was all she had wanted once. Not perfection. Not power. Not victory. Someone who would stay in the room. At Mount Sinclair Women's Hospital, doctors moved quickly. Lydia's blood pressure was high. The baby's heart rate dipped twice. The obstetrician, Dr. Anika Patel, explained the plan with clear calm. "We may need to move to emergency surgery." Lydia nodded. Rowan stood beside her, still holding her hand. "Can he stay?" Dr. Patel looked at the chart. "He is authorized." A contraction broke over Lydia before she could answer. Hours blurred. Then alarms. Then the words emergency C-section. Then Rowan's hand against her forehead, his voice close to her ear. "I am here. I am here. I am here." Outside the surgical suite, Caleb arrived in chaos. He had learned from a gossip alert, not from Lydia. Pregnant Hartwell Harris rushed into Mount Sinclair Private Maternity Wing. The alert reached him while federal agents were entering Blackwood Capital's offices. For 1 second, he looked at the men in government jackets. Then he ran. His accounts were frozen by the time he reached the garage. His primary car was subject to seizure. His driver would not answer. Caleb Blackwood, once photographed beside presidents, hailed a taxi in the snow. At the hospital, he pushed through the entrance wild-eyed, coat open, hair wet. "My name is Caleb Blackwood. Lydia Hartwell is in labor. I am the father." The nurse at reception looked at her screen. "You are not on the approved list." "That is my child." "Sir, Miss Hartwell's birth plan is legally filed. Only Mr. Rowan Ellery is approved for delivery, recovery, and neonatal access." Caleb slammed his hand on the desk. "I am the biological father." The nurse's expression remained calm. "Security is already on its way. Get me a doctor." A voice came from the hallway. "That will not help." Caleb turned. Rowan stood there in surgical scrubs, face pale, hair damp, eyes red-rimmed with fear. For one moment, the rivalry disappeared. "Is she alive?" Caleb asked. Rowan's throat moved. "She is in surgery. The baby's heart rate dropped. They are working." Caleb's face changed. The anger drained, leaving something naked beneath it. They stood in the sterile hallway, two men who had spent months circling power, now reduced to waiting for a door to open. For 40 minutes, no one spoke. Then Dr. Patel came out. Rowan stepped forward. Caleb did too, but security blocked him. Dr. Patel looked at Rowan first. "She is stable. The baby is stable. You have a daughter." "A daughter." Caleb closed his eyes. The word entered him with a force he was not prepared for. Rowan's knees nearly gave. He covered his face with both hands, shoulders shaking once. Dr. Patel smiled. 5 pounds, 9 ounces. Small, but loud. She is going to observation for a little while. Caleb looked past them toward the nursery doors. "I want to see her." Dr. Patel's smile faded politely. "That is up to Miss Hartwell's plan and court order." "I am her father." Rowan turned. His face had changed again. The fear was still there, but now it had a wall around it. "Biology is not entry clearance." Caleb stared at him. "You do not get to keep me from my child forever." "No," Rowan said. "Your choices will do that, or they will not. But today, Lydia recovers in peace." A nurse rolled a small bassinet past the glass window. Caleb saw her. Tiny, red-faced, dark hair damp against her head. One fist waved in the air, impossibly small and furious. His daughter. His hand lifted toward the glass. Then Lydia's voice came from the recovery doorway, weak but clear. "Her name is Nora." Caleb turned. Lydia lay in a hospital bed, pale from surgery, lips colorless, eyes open. Rowan moved to her side instantly. She did not look at Caleb with hatred. That would have been easier. She looked at him with distance. "Nora Hartwell," she said. "Not Blackwood." Caleb's face crumpled. "Lydia." She turned her head toward Rowan. "Take me to our daughter." "Our." Caleb stepped forward, but security moved first. The recovery room door closed. The baby cried once behind the glass, and Caleb, standing in a hospital wing he had once donated to for his own publicity, understood that there were rooms money could build, but not enter. Chapter 10. The final collapse took 6 months. It did not happen in one dramatic explosion. That would have been kinder. It happened in filings, margin calls, board votes, frozen accounts, investor exits, and headlines that grew less shocked each time. Blackwood Capital lost Northstar first. The oversight board paused the contract after discovering pension-linked collateral and undisclosed offshore stabilization accounts. Then Ellery Systems announced its hydrogen storage breakthrough, making Caleb's old infrastructure plan look like an expensive road to yesterday. The market understood faster than pride did. Blackwood shares fell. Lenders called. The SEC expanded its inquiry. Sienna Val received limited immunity in exchange for cooperation. She gave testimony, ledgers, recordings, and a description of how Caleb planned to smear Lydia as unstable before filing for custody. She cried during one deposition. No one cared. Caleb resigned as CEO under pressure, though the announcement used softer language. Transition, governance, strategic review. Men like Caleb rarely fall. They transition until no one invites them back. Family court moved more slowly. The judge recognized Caleb's biological connection, but refused unsupervised access while financial fraud proceedings and defamation evidence remained active. He was granted the right to petition for a structured parenting evaluation after demonstrating stability and refraining from harassment. Caleb called it theft. The judge called it consequence. Lydia did not attend every hearing. She had a newborn. She had healing to do. She had no desire to build her daughter's early life around Caleb's panic. Nora grew. She gained weight. She learned to grip Lydia's finger. She developed a dramatic frown that made Rowan laugh and Lydia say, "That is definitely not from my side," though both knew it might be. Rowan did not adopt Nora immediately. That would have made gossip easy and law messy. Instead, he did what Lydia trusted him to do. He showed up. Night feedings, pediatric appointments, car seat adjustments, quiet walks when Lydia needed to sleep. He never called himself Nora's father in public. He never demanded a title. He simply became the person Nora turned toward when his voice entered a room. One evening, Lydia found him in the nursery, holding Nora against his shoulder while reading a shareholder report aloud in a low voice. "Are you teaching her finance?" Lydia asked from the doorway. Rowan looked up. "She finds debt restructuring soothing. That is concerning. She is advanced." Lydia smiled. The smile stayed. That was new. Later, after Nora slept, Lydia and Rowan sat in the kitchen with tea. "I received a letter from Caleb," Lydia said. Rowan's hand stilled. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." She unfolded the letter. It was not long. Caleb apologized, poorly at first, then better near the end. He wrote that he had mistaken legacy for possession. He wrote that seeing Nora through glass had changed him. He wrote that he did not expect forgiveness, but wanted the chance someday to know his daughter without harming Lydia. Rowan listened. "What do you think?" he asked. Lydia folded the letter. "I think men become honest when there is nothing left to gain. Sometimes that is still honesty." She looked at him. "You are annoyingly fair. Only when it does not endanger you." Lydia considered the letter again. "I will give it to the court evaluator. Not to Nora. Not yet." Rowan nodded. That was another thing she loved about him. He did not confuse restraint with cruelty. Chapter 11. A year after the night at Valerian, Lydia returned to the restaurant. Not to reclaim Caleb's booth. To buy the building. Hartwell Green had been looking for a new public-facing foundation space, and Valerian's owner wanted to retire after a bad year of wealthy men making scenes near dessert. The location was perfect. Private enough for donors. Beautiful enough for events. Symbolic enough to amuse Lydia privately. The dining room was empty when she arrived. Sunlight replaced chandelier light. Chairs were stacked on tables. The velvet alcove looked smaller in daylight, less like a throne, and more like furniture. Lydia stood beside the booth where Caleb had seen her pregnant. Nora slept in a stroller nearby, bundled in a cream coat. Rowan stood near the bar, speaking with the architect. Marin reviewed purchase documents at a table. The owner, Jean-Pierre, approached Lydia with visible nerves. "Mrs. Hartwell, I hope that night did not influence your opinion of the establishment." Lydia smiled. "It influenced my opinion of several people, not the restaurant." He relaxed. "What will you make of it? A center for women rebuilding after financial abuse, medical vulnerability and divorce litigation. Legal clinics by day, fundraising dinners by night." Jean-Pierre blinked. "That is unexpected. Most useful things are." After he left, Lydia walked to Nora's stroller. Her daughter slept with one fist near her cheek, mouth open, utterly indifferent to symbolism. Lydia touched the blanket. Once she had thought survival meant leaving everything behind. The house, the marriage, the memories, the rooms where she had been humiliated. Now she understood something different. Sometimes survival meant returning with keys. Rowan joined her. "The architect says the private alcove can become a counseling room." Lydia looked at the booth. "Good. Too poetic?" "Just enough." He smiled. For a while they stood together in the quiet restaurant. Lydia remembered the silver gown, Sienna's smirk, Caleb's voice asking if the child was his. She remembered the heat of humiliation and the cold clarity that followed. That night had not been her lowest point. It had been the moment Caleb realized she was no longer standing where he left her. "Do you ever regret using the embryo?" Rowan asked quietly. She turned to him. "No, never? Never." Her gaze returned to Nora. "I regret trying to build a family with a man who treated love like ownership. I regret hiding how much power I had because I thought it made me more lovable. I regret letting silence protect his vanity for so long." She took a slow breath. But Nora, no, she was never a revenge. She was the future I refused to let him ruin. Rowan's expression softened. "And us?" She looked at him. There had been no proposal, no rushed wedding, no public announcement designed to wound Caleb. They had moved slowly, perhaps because both understood that real love did not need to win a scene. "Us," Lydia said, "is what happened when I stopped mistaking intensity for devotion." Rowan laughed softly. "That may be the least romantic sentence anyone has ever said to me, but accurate. Very." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. No cameras. No applause. No audience. Just the quiet fact of being loved without being managed. Chapter 12. 2 years later, Nora took her first steps in the old Valerian dining room. The restaurant was no longer called Valerian. A brass sign outside read Hartwell House. Inside, the velvet booths were gone. The chandeliers remained, softened by daylight. The old private alcove had become a consultation room, where women met lawyers, financial planners, and patient advocates. The main dining room hosted donor dinners at night and support workshops by day. On the wall near the entrance, a line of text was engraved in bronze. "A woman is not unstable because she finally brings evidence." Lydia had written it after seeing one too many petitions describe betrayed wives as emotional. Nora toddled between Lydia and Rowan, while a group of staff applauded quietly. She had Rowan's patience for exactly 3 steps, then Lydia's determination to fall forward anyway. When she reached Lydia's arms, she laughed. The sound filled the room. Lydia lifted her, kissing both cheeks. "Well done, little star." Rowan stood nearby, holding a small wooden toy. He looked at Nora, with an expression so open it still made Lydia's throat tighten. The court had not erased Caleb from Nora's life. Lydia had never asked for that. After the investigations, after probation, after the loss of his company and most of his fortune, Caleb had begun supervised visits. He arrived early. He brought simple books. He asked permission before taking photos. He was not redeemed. He was learning. There was a difference. Lydia allowed the difference to exist without making it her burden. Caleb would never be the father he imagined himself to be that night in the hospital corridor. He would not own Nora's name, her home, or Lydia's peace. If he became steady enough, Nora might know him. If he did not, she would still be loved. That was the promise. Later that afternoon, Lydia stood alone in the old alcove, now painted warm white, with a small table and 2 chairs. The room smelled faintly of fresh wood and coffee. Marin entered with documents. Final donor list for next month's gala. Lydia took it. Any surprises? 1. Lydia looked up. Marin hesitated. Sienna Vale made a donation. Lydia's brows lifted. Under her own name? Yes, to the Legal Evidence Fund. Lydia looked down at the list. Sienna's name sat near the bottom, not large enough to impress, large enough to mean something. Do you want to return it? Lydia considered. Sienna had been cruel. She had helped Caleb humiliate her. She had enjoyed taking the seat Lydia once occupied, but she had also turned over evidence when it mattered, not from purity, but from survival. Sometimes survival was the first honest thing a person did. No, Lydia said. Keep it. Marin nodded. After she left, Lydia looked around the room. This was where Caleb had confronted her, where Sienna had smiled, where Rowan had stood between her and a man who believed biology was ownership, where Lydia had learned that being seen did not have to mean being exposed. Her phone buzzed. A message from Caleb's court coordinator. Mr. Blackwood completed his parenting session. He asked whether Nora still likes the moon book. Lydia replied, yes. Bring it next visit. She put the phone away. Then she returned to the dining room. Nora was in Rowan's arms, trying to feed him a cracker with great seriousness. Rowan accepted it as if receiving an award. Lydia laughed. For years, she had thought revenge would feel like watching Caleb fall. It did not. Watching him fall had been loud, necessary, and temporary. This ordinary room full of work and laughter, and a child reaching for both her hands, was the lasting part. Caleb had believed legacy meant blood, name, control, and inheritance. Lydia knew better now. Legacy was what remained safe, because you chose not to repeat the harm done to you. Legacy was a door opened for someone who had been locked out. Legacy was a child who would never have to wonder whether love came with ownership papers. She crossed the room. Nora reached for her. Rowan smiled. Outside, evening settled over the city, turning the windows gold. The old restaurant no longer belonged to men celebrating victories they did not deserve. It belonged to the women who walked in after being humiliated and learned they could buy the room, change the locks, and fill it with their own future. Lydia took Nora into her arms. The little girl rested her head against her shoulder. For the first time in a very long time, Lydia did not feel like someone's ex-wife, someone's scandal, someone's mistake, or someone's lost possession. She felt like herself, and that was the one thing Caleb Blackwood had never known how to take. Subscribe for more emotional stories about betrayal, hidden strength, and justice, served with evidence, dignity, and power.